everyone. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast is the place where members of the law enforcement community share their wisdom and experience through me, the chaplain, so that they can encourage others who wear the badge. On Hey Chaplain, you'll hear from dispatchers and federal agents, sheriffs and U.S. Marshals, as well as local detectives and patrolmen in my hometown of Kansas City. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain deliver advice and insights so that police officers everywhere can survive and thrive. Today I'm talking to the Honorable Robert Serra, a retired district court judge from right here in Kansas City. You don't want to miss this judge's point of view on officers testifying in court and some of the stories he shares from his time on the bench. I ask what would be the worst mistake a cop could make when testifying, and also what the judge's advice would be to new officers who are about to take the stand for the first time. Here is Judge Serra. Welcome, Judge Serra. I'm glad you're here today.
Glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you here to talk about the courtroom experience that a lot of police officers have to go into from time to time. And so can you tell me about your legal career?
Well, first of all, I graduated from the University of Kansas School of Law.
Rock jock.
And then I went on active duty with the United States Army. And when I finished my tour of duty, I went back to southeast Kansas. I'm originally from Frontenac by Pittsburgh.
Oh, yes.
And a friend of mine was a deputy district attorney at that time, deputy county attorney, and he was the chief deputy. And I saw him at his father's funeral, and he asked me what I was going to do, and I said I didn't know. I'd just gotten home because I took about a 3-month trip to Europe and stayed there after I got out of the Army. And he said, we've got an opening in our office. So one thing led to another. I ended up as a deputy county attorney.
Okay.
And I stayed in that position. At that time, it was part-time, and you could have a law practice also. And, of course, it was necessary because the pay was like $395 a month. So, at any rate, I did that.
This would have been in the 60s, approximately?
Yeah, it would have been probably 66, middle 60s.
Okay.
And I left there and went solely into private practice. After that, I was assistant county counselor, and then I became a municipal court judge. And I stayed in that position for about 5 years, and then I went solely into private. That was also part-time. And I went into private practice, stayed there until I decided to run for the district court judgeship in 2000. I was elected, and I stayed there until retirement. So,
why did you want to go into law?
As with so many things in life, it was just a question of circumstances. What happened, I took advanced ROTC at Pittsburgh.
Okay.
A friend of mine and I both got very late reporting dates. So we had from May to, I think, the first of the next year to report. And mine was in armor at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and he was in artillery, and he had to report to Fort Bliss. And we both decided we'd go pursue further education. So he got a master's degree in mathematics, and I said, not for me. So I just kind of looked through what was available, and I said, I think I'll try law school and see how I like it.
Sure.
That's what happened.
So I was going to ask, when you were in the Army, were you in armor or were you in JAG?
Armor.
Okay.
They wanted a 4-year commitment for JAG, so I didn't want 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
maybe it would have been a good thing, but I didn't at the time want it.
in your Army time, did you go defend the Fulda Gap, or were you stateside? Or
I was stateside the whole time, mainly at Fort Knox.
Okay.
Which was good.
Sure. Yeah.
Good post.
So how far into your legal career did the idea of being a judge, when did that emerge? When did you think, I might actually be a judge in a courtroom? Was that an ambition from the beginning?
No. No. They had an opening at municipal court, and one of the judges moved on to district court.
Okay.
And so a friend of mine at the city said, there's going to be an opening, and alerted me. And so I applied for it and got it. And
did you have to be talked into it, or was it just like, hey, this is a great opportunity?
I thought it was a good opportunity. And I never thought about district court, but friends of mine talked me into running for that office because it's elective office in Wyandotte County. At any rate, I filed and I won by about 800 votes. So, and I stayed there 17 years. So
wow. Did you, once you were a judge at the district level, did you miss practicing law? I mean, I'm sure it's good to be a judge.
Yeah.
but did you miss that?
I missed that, except getting calls in the middle of the night or having to go down. I did occasionally have to go down to the courthouse as a judge, but not very often.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't miss the phone calls at all hours of the day and night. I always believed in keeping my home number in the phone book, so people could call me if they need a representation. So I didn't miss that at all, and I didn't miss having to collect fees that people didn't pay, and
sure,
all that.
What was your favorite part of being a lawyer?
I didn't like domestic relations cases, and I stopped taking those. I did a lot of estate planning and wills and.
Was that satisfying work?
That was satisfying work. I liked that a lot. And then at one time, I did a lot of workman's compensation, and I liked that. And I liked immigration work. Okay.
So what kind of cases did you preside over as a district court judge?
Various kinds of cases as they continued to change. Well, in fact, the whole time I did preliminary hearings, I did some traffic cases on Fridays. I initially had domestic relations cases, and for a while I did protection from abuse cases. I did those, signed those orders when people came in, sometimes truthful, sometimes not.
Sure. That's got to be hard to discern.
Very hard to discern.
Yeah.
Made some mistakes and believed people that I shouldn't have believed, but
sure.
We, sooner or later it gets found out. So.
Yeah.
But that's generally what we did.
Okay. How often did you see law enforcement officers in court? Was that a very rare thing? Was it very common?
Twice a week on preliminary hearings, and then Friday on traffic cases.
Okay. So you'd have street cops and detectives and different types of people testifying?
Yeah, highway patrol. So
Sure.
Sometimes Missouri police officers where the crimes continued into Missouri, and they made the stop, and so they would testify. But and sometimes Johnson County officers. So just varied.
Okay. Did you feel that officers appearing in your court, were they well prepared?
Most of the time, they were well prepared. Of course, if they needed to refresh their recollections, they brought their police reports with them.
Sure.
And you give them that opportunity. They couldn't just read from the report, but if it was to refresh the recollections, they did. And generally speaking, I think the officers were pretty well prepared. I'm probably the only problem. On rare occasions, they wouldn't show, and so then we'd have to call their superior office and tell them so and so didn't show, and they'd get them up there. Sometimes they're at home.
I can imagine.
Day off or something, but generally they showed up and not in bad mood. They apologized and No, I had very little problems with police officers.
Excellent. Excellent. I spoke to a cop the other day that was testifying in court, and it was about a case from 8 years previous. And so he absolutely had to go back to his notes and, refresh himself on, what had happened and, what he had already written down. Did most of your officers, were they dealing with cases that were pretty fresh, or did you occasionally have ones that went back a long period of time?
Occasionally there'd be, where someone was missing in action, and they finally found them, or they were in the penitentiary and out of state, and we didn't bring them back. But generally speaking, the cases were fairly current.
Do you recall any just awful performances by a cop?
Rarely, but we did have. There were occasions where they weren't prepared. They didn't bring their notes. They forgot to bring them, and so they kind of stumbled through things. And
sure,
but
from your point of view, is that the fault of the officer? Is that the fault of the DA?
Be the officer, because they receive a subpoena, so they know what case they're on.
Right.
Case number, name, and their original reports are there at the city, or wherever the agency is, so they know to review their files and bring anything with them, particularly if they're complex enough where they think they may have problems testifying. Then they generally bring a file folder and testify from that.
So from your point of view,
to refresh their reflex.
if he came in just laid an egg, that's on him.
That's
right?
on him.
Okay.
Yeah. But generally speaking, the prosecutors and almost always meet with the officers ahead of time.
Right.
And they go over their testimonies. So that's the other reason that it's rare that they're totally unprepared.
Yeah, well, that's what I was asking. If the prosecutor just failed to properly prepare them, I could see, there being maybe some problem there. But I agree that, the officer should, he knows what he's doing. He should take responsibility for it.
Exactly. And defense counsel always ask, have you gone over this testimony with the district attorney? I mean, to show that it's prepared.
Right.
Right. And that's an argument they use before juries, but for whatever good it does.
Yeah. Have you ever had any surprises with cops other than not showing up?
Well, sometimes their testimony turns out a little different than what the charges would indicate. And of course, there were times when, particularly with preliminary hearings, where I would dismiss the case because I have to find there's probable cause to believe a crime has been committed and probable cause to believe this defendant committed the crime.
Right.
If the officer's testimony doesn't give me those grounds, then I don't have a choice. I can dismiss it. They can refile from preliminary hearing, but
sure.
If the case doesn't warrant going to a jury trial for the lack of good evidence and for the expense it's going to cost the taxpayers to try the case, then that's the time to cut it loose.
Yeah.
So by the time they go through the police investigation, the investigation and charging by the county attorney or district attorney, preliminary hearing, and then a jury trial. I mean, you've generally, and I'm not saying that some jury's not going to find these people not guilty. However, there is sufficient grounds. By that time, it's generally enough that they feel they can go with the jury trial. So, as you know, particularly when the case gets a little older, motions are filed when the case is 6 or 7 years old. The witnesses don't want to testify anymore, or they're gone.
Right.
So then cases get dismissed, and the Kansas City Star can say the man was not guilty. And
Right. Right. So have you ever had a police officer contradict his report in any kind of, strong way? I can imagine that the report could have been written badly and that he'd want to correct that. But I don't know how much latitude he has there.
Yeah,
Has that happened?
He can say that, but I mean, that gives the defense attorney a good argument. But sure, there were times when the officer would say, well, that's not exactly what I meant. What I meant was so and so. And
does that get very far?
depends on how he presents it, I suppose. But it gives the defense counsel a good argument. Were you right then, or are you right now? Or was it the truth then or the truth now? So,
call his whole testimony into question.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the strangest thing you've seen in your courtroom?
Well, I had a guy that they brought in, and he wouldn't keep quiet. He was shouting and cursing. This happened to be a preliminary hearing, and I told him, I say, okay, you have three choices. You can be quiet and listen and talk when you're supposed to. Second choice, we can go with this preliminary hearing without you. We have a holding cell right next door. We'd put you in the holding cell. And the third choice, I said, the sheriff has a good supply of duct tape, and we'll just tape your mouth closed. I wouldn't have done it.
Sure, but that's sure. That makes your point, though, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, he shut up finally. I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah.
He was just screaming and cursing, and I told him 2 or 3 times. I said, "Sir, you're going to get a fair hearing. Keep your mouth shut, and no more cursing in the courtroom." Mm-hmm. So finally, I had to get a little strong with him, and so he got the point.
Now, we probably should explain, when you were a district judge, the enforcement within the courtroom, was that marshals or sheriff's deputies?
Sheriff's deputies.
Sheriff's deputies.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had deputies there in the courtroom to keep the peace.
Yes, and depending on the nature of the case and my suspects as to what could happen, perhaps based on previous experience with the defendant, we could have 4 sheriff's deputies in the courtroom.
What was typical? 1?
Typical was just 1, right.
Okay.
And if it was a serious case, we probably would have 2, one at the door and one up close by me. But there were cases where we put several.
Were you always able to keep ahead of that from people getting unruly? I mean, were you always able to have enough manpower to keep that tamped down?
Oh yeah. But once I told them what could happen to them, and they want to be present. The law allows the preliminary to go on if they're unruly. I could go ahead and hear that without the defendant. Just his attorney would be there, and he'd be next door where he couldn't see or hear. So,
nobody wants that, right?
No, they want.
So that's pretty good leverage to keep the people under control. Then,
it was. Yeah.
So I have heard cops get into a mode of talking where they are unnaturally precise and very artificial, almost robotic in the way that they describe things in very specific, cop language. And I've heard them tease each other that that's how they talk when they're on the stand. Do you see that kind of artificial, robotic kind of talk? Very, very not natural.
So occasionally there are police officers that do that. Yeah, they would be in the minority.
Okay. Does that help or hurt? Like in front of a jury?
In front of a jury, that it depends on the jury. I suppose I'd say generally it doesn't hurt, but it could. There could be some jurors. You never know what a juror's going to pick up on.
Sure. It'd probably be better to come across natural and relaxed.
Yes.
Than robotic and artificial.
That's true. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. What is maybe the worst mistake a cop could make in the courtroom? If a cop's being called in to testify, what's really what's the worst they could do?
I suppose if he has to justify his language to to the defendant at the time of the arrest. I particularly now where they have recordings.
Yeah, the body worn cameras.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly, and didn't used to be a problem, but because naturally they wouldn't use that kind of language in court.
Right.
But every once in a while you'll get a recording that's pretty colorful, to say the least. And
well, I've had officers that say, well, I can't help it. That's just how I talk. And yet, when they go into a courtroom, I'm pretty sure they don't swear like that. No. Have you ever had a police officer swear in court?
No.
Okay.
I've never had them swear. I've had defense counsel say, I listened to the recordings. You said this, this, this. You called it the defendant, not racial language, but I've never had that. But
profanities.
Profanities,
yeah.
And call him a blanking idiot.
Right. But they won't repeat that in front of you in a courtroom, right?
No, they don't usually. But they will ask if they said that, and they got the recordings, so they're truthful.
Right. What would your advice be as far as the best thing for them to keep in mind as they go into a courtroom to testify?
To be well prepared and to be able to testify without continually asking to refer to their notes, because that gives defense counsel. They can question whether they remember any of the testimony or not, or the events. Well prepared is definitely the way to proceed.
Excellent. Well, I've known a few cops that were just nervous, just sick to their stomach nervous about.
Some of them do get that way, and they stutter and stammer, but the experienced ones who have testified many times seem to be able to just roll with it. And these days you don't have it, but when I first started, of course, even with highway patrolmen, occasionally they'd get in struggles with the defendant, and the defendant, they'd have pictures of them with bruises on their face and so forth. And but generally, I think now they get backups, but it still happens where they get punched or shot at.
Sure, yeah.
One time, a person that we didn't expect to give any trouble jumped up and tried to leave the courthouse.
Oh.
And one of the police officers chased him and tackled him and drug him back in. So
really? Not one of your deputies, but a police officer.
That was in the courtroom.
Right. Now, really, I guess, I don't know if this is a question of jurisdiction or what, but police officers in uniform who just are there to testify, sometimes they've jumped into the action as well.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the first one on to get there close to him, so the guy jumped the wall between where the counsel tables are. And there is a swinging gate there. I don't know why he did it, but he
went over the partition. And,
yeah.
The cop chased him down.
Yep, got him. We had one time, we used to bring at the city, we used to bring prisoners down from the county jail, and they would bring them over in sort of a Congo line.
Right.
And they were supposed to be tied to each other or chained to each other. And I always knew ahead of time before I started video arraignments, and then we stopped bringing them over.
Right.
But at any rate, they would tell me how many prisoners I have. So I don't remember I think it was 12 or 13 we were supposed to have. I came through the door with the sheriff's deputies jailers bringing them. I counted them. They were one short.
Uh-oh.
And I said to the jailer, I checked before, and I said, there's supposed to be 13 prisoners. How come we only brought 12? So he goes, he said. The guy still was in leg irons. I don't know how he got down. He went down the stairs, somehow made it, and from the second floor, and he made it up the street, course, he was in orange.
Oh, yeah. 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 The orange jumpsuit and the leg irons tend to stand out.
Yeah.
Downtown Kansas City. Yeah.
He made it downtown, but they caught him.
Oh, my goodness. Well, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that's probably another reason to do the video arraignments. Is you don't have to move them from building to building.
I started that. I didn't get to use it. My term was up, but I was one that started the video arrangements at the city.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Huh.
Because I had learned that as being the president when I was president of the Municipal Judges Association of Kansas. I found out how many other jurisdictions were using video arraignment, and we weren't. So
sure.
That helped. That situation of losing that prisoner helped.
Yeah.
Convince the commissioners to go ahead and do video arraignment. So.
Now, when you watch movies or TV shows, do you just avoid courtroom drama? Is that too much a busman's holiday? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I don't want to sit there and criticize or say, no, that's not the way it works.
Right.
I'd rather watch The Rifleman and Wyatt Earp.
That's fantastic. May I ask, what have you done over the years as you deal with things in the courtroom? It's people's, worst days, and sometimes they're going to lose their freedom and, pretty serious stuff. What have you done to keep yourself healthy, to keep your heart healthy as you deal with some of the human tragedy that comes through your courtroom?
Well, I have no idea what has caused those sort of things, but in terms of actual physical health, I ended up with a couple stents.
Oh, really? Your physical heart was not very healthy.
Yeah. But I never let it bother me a lot mentally. I didn't take it home.
Able to keep it compartmentalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I tried to leave it at the courthouse and then went home and just kind of forgot about it. And I if I had something I had to work on, I'd go in early or stay late. I wouldn't take it home to work on.
Oh, okay. Excellent. That's good.
Yeah. And I did that even in the practice of law. I tried not to mix my home life with my office.
Yeah. That's good. That's good advice. Excellent. Well, thank you, Judge. I appreciate you coming in today.
My pleasure. I enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that I imparted some valuable knowledge.
I'm sure you have. Thank you. I want to thank Judge Serra for sharing his experiences with us. This was one of my original goals for this podcast, to interview a judge and get his or her point of view about cops on the stand. So this was deeply satisfying to me to get this recording. Judge Serra is well thought of and came highly recommended by my friends when I went looking for a judge. Hopefully, I'll have future opportunities to interview more judges and other people who work alongside law enforcement officers to share wisdom and encouragement with you. If you like what you heard here, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain. I've certainly been on scenes where I'm watching them process that, this very helpful person is part of the police department. And they're like trying to make sense of that, in their head.
I think what helps is that we are responding, and we're definitely wearing civilian clothing, but we have a logo polo that says police department. Yeah. So we're not in a hard uniform. So it's kind of like a warm feeling. It's different than the uniformed officers. So we kind of have that attitude. And when we arrive on scene, we let the families know, I'm your advocate. I'll say, my name is Wendy, and I am with the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department and Victim Services Unit, and I'm your advocate.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain legal advice with respect to any particular legal matter. No listener of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of the information presented on this show without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Thank you for listening today, and as always, pray for peace in our city.